I'm going to be comparing the Wonka franchise to the Wreck-It Ralph franchise. The reason for that is because in part one of the series, when I compared the Wonka franchise to the Cloverfield franchise, Wonka won. And then when I compared Wreck-It Ralph to Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, Wreck-It Ralph won. So now I'm going to compare those two franchises that won against each other. When you look at highest score for each franchise, the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory from 1971 has a 92%. Ralph Breaks the Internet has an 88%. When you look at lowest score, the original Wreck-It Ralph has an 87%. When you look at Charlie and the when you look at the movie Wonka that came out last year, that one is an 82%. When you look at average score, Willy Wonka is an average of 85. Ralph is an average of 87. Then we look at gap between lowest and highest score. You got a gap of 10 in the case of Wonka and a gap of literally only 1% in the case of Ralph. That's literally as low as you can get. Ralph wins this round, so it's won every round so far except for the first round, so Ralph is going to win no matter what. But now let's look at which franchise I personally prefer. One big difference between these two franchises right away is that I have read the original book Charlie and the Chocolate Factory from Roald Dahl before, whereas Ralph is not based on a book. Also actually got to see Wonka in theaters last year, and I really enjoyed it. I thought that the actor who played Wonka, Timothy Chalamet, did a great job, and the fact that he can both play a fun, lighthearted, whimsical character like Willy Wonka and also a much more serious character like Paul Atreides in Dune shows how versatile Timothy Chalamet is as an actor. Those are two very different characters. When it comes to the original Wreck-It Ralph, I really like getting this movie with all these video game references in it. I think the idea that all these characters from video games actually are real, but the humans don't know that is really interesting. The idea that you have this arcade, and while the humans are not playing the arcade games, these characters in the games interact with each other. They have their own lives. I really enjoy that. I like the journey for Ralph in this movie. I like the relationship that develops between him and Vanellope. I think it's really sweet, and even though Vanellope on the surface might seem really annoying, I think it works here. I like the way the movie looks. The voice acting is good across the board. There's some effective moments of humor and also good dramatic moments. When it comes to Ralph Breaks the Internet, I certainly don't think this one's as good as the original film. Really, the biggest issue I would say is that because the movie relies a lot on internet trends, internet references, internet jokes, it not only made the movie frankly feel a bit dated back when it came out, but especially looking back on it as time passes, that just makes the movie feel dated because you have references that just tie the movie to a specific time, and it prevents it from holding up too well over the passage of time. Also, when you think about it, the conflict about trying to get this thing that's needed for Vanellope's video game, this part that's needed to keep Vanellope's video game online so it isn't shut down permanently, that's resolved like 75% of the way through the movie, and then there's a different conflict that plays out, which has to do with Ralph's character flaws, insecurities, or he doesn't want to lose Vanellope, so he deliberately sabotages her video game. And then suddenly you got this big version of Ralph that personifies Ralph's worst tendencies, and by the end of the movie, that conflict is resolved where Ralph and Vanellope are in a better place. They're still definitely friends. They talk with each other, but Vanellope also spending time in this video game that she likes. And don't get me wrong, I think this message of learning to let go, of letting your friend have their own life as well, wanting them to be happy, is a good message, I would say. But it feels like oh, it's odd that the conflict about trying to save Vanellope's video game is resolved, and then a whole different conflict is introduced about Ralph's insecurities that wasn't really set up previously. Overall, I still have fun with Ralph Breaks the Internet. I wouldn't say that it's a bad movie. I would just say that it was a disappointing movie. Also, because the sequel really shifts toward the internet and away from retro video games, a lot of the side characters from the first film feel more sidelined here, which I would say is disappointing. Now, when I look at the three Wonka films, I think the original classic from 1971 is great. It is pretty funny when you think about it that like, Grandpa Joe is the secret jerk of the movie, as many people have pointed out before. This guy is just lazily sitting in his bed for 20 years while his family's in poverty. And then suddenly, when the opportunity arises for him to eat some free candy, suddenly now he's capable of getting up out of bed and dancing all over the place. So, wow, Joe, you couldn't be bothered to get out of bed to get your family out of poverty, couldn't be bothered to help out your family, but suddenly you can get up and dance all around when you can eat some free candy. I think it's interesting, to be honest, that Wonka from 2023 is a more fun, lighthearted, whimsical, playful take on this story. Whereas when you think about that original classic, there is a cynicism to it, there's a creepiness to it, especially, of course, with the boat scene where the tone suddenly changes a lot. I mean, that scene's sure a bit creepy in the book, but it's way more creepy in the movie. I'm not overall that big a fan of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory from Tim Burton. There's certainly things I enjoy about it. I mean, Danny Elfman does a good job with the score. There's good visuals here. I like the way some of the characters are portrayed. Like Augustus Gloop actually seems like a glutton in this movie, whereas he does not really come off like a glutton in the 1971 classic. I like the way this movie changes up Veruca Salt. Actually, not Veruca Salt. Violet Beauregard. That's what I'm thinking of. I like the way that this movie changes the exact way that she's bratty. And also, while Veruca Salt doesn't come off like as much of a brat as she does in the 1971 film, she's not done badly in this version. I mean, Mike TV is done quite well. I also appreciate that this movie actually gives personality to the other grandparents, whereas in the 1971 film and in the book actually as well, it's really only Grandpa Joe that has a personality. The other grandparents are forgettable. But that's not true in Tim Burton's film. He actually makes it so that Grandpa George is this cynical curmudgeon that states the harsh truths no one else wants to hear, and even the other grandparents are more involved. Think about the 1971 classic. Aside from Joe, the other grandparents not only are in bed the whole runtime, they barely have any dialogue. But I don't like the way that Johnny Depp portrays Wonka because he makes the character someone I don't want to spend time with, I don't want to be around, because I'm constantly feeling uncomfortable around Willy Wonka. This guy comes off as so weird, creepy, and awkward that I don't want to be around him because it feels like this guy has no clue how to interact with other people. He has no charm or charisma at all. I don't like the way Charlie Bucket is portrayed in this film because he comes off as just a Boy Scout, a goody two shoes, the perfect saint, perfect angelic little kid with a halo glowing over his head. This kid does nothing wrong. He's just perfect, makes no mistakes. That's not the way that kids actually are. So I'm like, man, in the classic, Charlie Bucket comes off like a real kid. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, you're like, yeah, Charlie Bucket is a good person for sure, but he's not perfect. That is much more the way the kids actually are. With Charlie and the Chocolate Factory from Tim Burton, you're like, this is what every parent wishes their child would be. They all wish their child would be a perfect angelic little saint that does nothing wrong. But it's not the way things actually play out. Which franchise do I prefer? It's an interesting question because I mean, I have more nostalgia for Willy Wonka, but if I was to ask myself, which movie do I think is worse, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory from Tim Burton or Ralph Breaks the Internet? I mean, I think I have more disappointment with Charlie, and I'm disappointed more by Tim Burton's take on this story. Oh, that makes me want to choose the Ralph franchise. Um, I think I'm going to choose the Ralph franchise, but Ralph was already going to win no matter what. Though wrap things up for this video. Bye everyone.